What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at Wigmund's patch 1.1 update. Wigmund is a title that I actually reviewed when it launched a little while back, actually. I will try to post the review in the description for the curious, as we're primarily going to be focusing on the update itself in this particular video. So if you want my full thoughts, check out the review. However, the very quick spark notes were that the primary thing that Wigmund kind of had going against it was a little bit of lack of build variety. Overall, it's an indie title, which means compared to incredibly ambitious AAA titles, they obviously had a smaller budget to work with and focused on a select few things. Nonetheless, what we saw of Wigmund, I enjoyed a great deal. I thought it had some cool ideas, especially around the combat. And again, they took the primary things people were pointing out could be improved, and it seems like that's what this patch aimed to address. For starters, we have professions now, so we'll have all sorts of reagents we can gather throughout the world, animal skins, eggs, the usual suspects. But now you can learn professions. In the starting area, you can run into books that will then teach you an associated profession: medicine, survival, and crafting. Medicine is essentially potions, so you can gather materials and make your own, which is a nice touch, and kind of frees you up from having to rely on vendors. Now, survival is basically cooking. You'll get to cook all sorts of meals, which just make passive health regeneration outside of combat much more effective, as opposed to just eating mountains of apples, as it turned out. And then crafting is crafting. You'll be able to craft some of the smaller pieces of armor as well as upgrades to the armor that were actually added with this patch as well. Now, the two probably biggest and most substantial changes are actually the talent trees and the archery. As the game did not launch with archery, it was just added with this patch, and all of the combat styles, if you will, got a dedicated skill tree, of which there are 4. We can now differentiate between a sword and shield fighter as well as a more two-handed weapon fighter, the archer, of course, or the ranger, and then the faith-based caster build, a sort of melee caster that can do things like bless their own weapons, that type of stuff. And while these are, relatively speaking, simple, I do think they do a lot to vary up the play styles, as before this there were essentially 2 builds, melee guy or faith-based caster, which also included a lot of melee. And naturally, we can, of course, use bows now. I think this will be especially useful in the later parts of the game where you actually have companions with you, so you can use them as a sort of tank and then just pepper enemies from the back line and stay out of damage, which I think will help a lot of people, as the combat in Wigmund can be a bit challenging. In addition to that, as I mentioned, there are new items that were added pretty much via the crafting. We have a belt and a wrist slot now, adding even more options for our armor. And of course, the upgrades that I mentioned via the crafting, or maybe you'll find some out in the world. Haven't actually seen any just yet, but crafting will allow you to make them and upgrade your items if you like a particular look, as the gear progression originally was a fairly linear experience. And then if that wasn't enough, the game itself actually did see a lot of quality of life improvements, such as sprint toggling, minimap locking, monitor selection, UI scaling, just stuff like that. A lot of fixes to the game. And on top of that, as an indie title, it's pretty cheap. Full price is $15, but through the weekend you can actually get it half off, which I think is a great deal for a fun little game. So if you're looking to play something in between the bigger releases that the summer has kind of failed to deliver in 2022, I do think Wigmund is a fun game, as long as you go in understanding it's an indie experience. But that is all I've got for you guys today. Certainly hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.